As you're watching this, it's 5 o'clock in London, it's midday in New York, midnight in Hong Kong, 4 a.m. in Sydney, 9 a.m. in San Francisco, and 10:30 at night in Mumbai. Greetings, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Patrick L. Young, the IPO-VID Livestream, Series 27, Episode number 5. That is in the aggregate. Episode 161 starts here. Let me start with a quick apology, ladies and gentlemen. This show was scheduled to go live. I'm sorry. I have a problem today that has caused me to accelerate this and bring us forward. Thank you so much to our guest who's agreed to record the show a few hours earlier. So what you're watching now, ladies and gentlemen, it's already history, even though it's only a couple of hours old. Meanwhile, speaking of history, there's an audit fair going on in Europe. While hoping that the European Union will protect their Bund franchise to be an ongoing monopoly, Eurex are unwilling to launch an EU Bund futures contract. That's for European Union issued bonds, citing a lack of certainty of future supply. Meanwhile, ICE, no reservations, open to competition. They're launching futures next month. And of course, as we know, they have an absolute stranglehold on the short end of the euro currency yield curve. Meanwhile, big M&A this week, plaudits to the SIX Swiss exchange. You can catch actually some excellent PhDs that IPO vids rather, that we had in the past, where we were interviewing the fabulous CEO of the Nasdaq exchange, Bjorn Sibbern. They bought Aquis for $260 million, a lot of value to unpack therein, and a great sale for another previous IPO vid alumnus, Alistair Haynes. Finally, for today's intro segment, happy birthday, Stock Connect. 1 decade on, and the Hong Kong Exchange's initiative looks stronger than ever, expanding in oh so many ways. Exchange Invest, having been a fan from day one, remains hugely supportive of this initiative, and we see oh so many ways, so many directions, new dimensions into which this is going to expand and make Hong Kong exchanges bigger, better, stronger, and allow us a perfect pipeline between the Chinese mainland and the rest of the world. Our guest today, ladies and gentlemen, is Louisjan Bonthuys. We're going to be discussing the topic, the evolution of markets technology. And what better guest to have than Louisjan? He's got over 2 decades of experience at securities and trading technology, where he was building automated trading systems, surveillance and CSD solutions in global markets, deeply engaged with a multiplicity of regulatory frameworks. Louisjan Bonthuys knows markets, ladies and gentlemen. Nowadays, Louisjan is VP of Engineering at HousingAnywhere, leading diverse teams across data science, product development, and infrastructure to drive innovation and support Europe's leading marketplace for rental accommodations, securing accommodation for over 100,000 tenants annually. Louisjan, welcome to the show. It's great to see you, Louisjan. Where in the world are you today?
Hi, Patrick. Thanks for having me. I'm in Rotterdam. The HousingAnywhere office is in Rotterdam, and I've got the nice Rotterdam skyline behind me.
It's a fabulous skyline, Rotterdam, and actually much ignored, I think, as a place to go and stay and spend a few days. It's quite spectacular, not just an incredible port and industrial city, but so much going on. I've even been known to actually stay in Rotterdam when I was going through Amsterdam airport, because it's about equidistant. You walk into the train station, you get on a train, you sit in the train for 20 minutes longer, and then you come back the next day to the airport. It doesn't really matter. And quite often the hotels are a quarter of the price of Amsterdam when it's busy in the summer.
And it's a quick train trip as well. So the train infrastructure is now like 20, 30 minutes between Schiphol and Rotterdam. So it's actually very easy to commute around here.
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, that's what I found was it was quite ridiculous, because to get to the other side of Amsterdam actually ends up taking you longer, because you end up having to take like a local train and a tram and something else. Whereas Rotterdam, particularly this train station, if I remember correctly, the Weston is pretty much opposite, the opposite side of the street to the railway station. It was so easy, never left. You didn't have to leave Amsterdam. Anyway, station and there you are. The wonders of the Netherlands. What's that like actually to live in after a lifetime in South Africa?
Once you get used to the weather and the food, it's actually very pleasant. Like life is quite easy, and everybody is geared towards the same goals and stuff. So it makes it pretty enjoyable lifestyle here in the Netherlands, I have to admit. Of course, you miss the a lot of things from your home country, from South Africa, but it is a pleasant experience living here, especially with the infrastructure in this country.
Yeah, the infrastructure is phenomenal, and you're so well positioned, whether you want to drive, take the train, or fly to the rest of Europe. And particularly, I have to say, I'm a huge fan of the trains around there, because you can go to several different countries all within the matter of a few hours, and it's not that difficult to drive either.
No, it's pretty simple. And if you think about it, like 4 hours from Paris, about a couple of hours, and you're in the Christmas markets in Germany. So it makes life a lot easier to travel around as well. And of course, the Netherlands got a lot of cycle areas and parklands and stuff. So from a nature perspective, it's actually quite nice as well.
It's absolutely magnificent. It's just missing the elevation that you get from being in South Africa, and I suppose the great winemaking tradition. But they do not bad beer, so at least they're trying very, very hard in those parts. So that's good. Yeah, actually, it's so funny. I remember years ago I had a CEO of one of the sort of further to the south European exchanges, and he did this annual trip where he would go like London, Paris, Brussels, Amsterdam, and somewhere else out there. And I was like, great. And so you must, rack up the time on the train. And he looked at me absolutely blankly, and his secretary kept booking. And because they'd been booking this for like 30 years, this trip, and they booked the trip all flights. And it was like, dude, you do realize that when you're sitting in Paris, it's like Paris to Brussels, you get on whatever it is, the ice or something, and it takes you, 1 hour and 15 minutes, sorry, TGV. And, similarly, when you're sitting then in Brussels, you can just get on the train in 2.5 hours or 3 hours, you're sitting in Amsterdam. And it's like, really?
And it's extremely comfortable, because it allows you time on the train, and you can, on your commutes, you can work or watch YouTube or anything you like. So it's a lot better experience than driving and sitting in traffic for 45 minutes.
Yeah,
than
absolutely.
20 minutes.
And 100,000 times better than flying by plane, where basically the plane does the least effort in the whole trip. You end up having to fight your way through security and goodness knows whatever else for 2 hours in order to get on the train. It's crazy. So you've made this successful move. Tell us, what was it like moving out of the day-to-day rigors of STT and their fantastic series of installations around the world for trading technology, front-end trading technology, into this business, HousingAnywhere?
It was quite a change. In the beginning, it was quite a different world. I must admit, the technology stack, of course, is completely different. But the core essence of it is exactly the same. It's both creating marketplaces to attract both buyers and sellers to a marketplace, and actually, let's say, find the best pricing, the best common fit for both the buyers and the sellers. The approaches, of course, is completely different in terms of exchange markets, but this is also an exchange market to a certain extent. It is the same concept of bringing buyers and sellers together, having listings on the market, making sure your listings are well positioned, contains all the information for investors to actually take up the opportunity. And then, of course, a lot of effort is into building the products around it to basically enhance the product offering that's available. So although the worlds seem quite different, there's actually a lot of similarities, but there's also quite a few differences as well.
Yeah, it's really, really fascinating when you look at the whole thing. And I mean, this is one of the things I keep banging on about is, this is the age of the exchange. It's just the exchange world is still kind of on a high horse and refuses to acknowledge the fact that a marketplace like HousingAnywhere is an exchange.
It is. And I must say that the worlds are quite different in the sense of how the approach to the marketplaces actually evolved. So from exchange perspective, I sometimes look back and I still attend, of course, as you know, quite a few exchange conferences. Speak to quite a lot of engineering companies that's involved with delivering exchange products. And the one thing that is quite clear is that in certain cases, the evolution of, let's say, non-exchange marketplaces has actually gotten quite a bit forward, where sometimes it feels like the exchange marketplaces, especially from a software perspective, is actually quite stuck, like 20 years behind. I'll give you one example. In these marketplaces that we run, and a lot of these kind of marketplaces, you'll find that we are completely cloud-based. There's never talk about not being cloud-based, and we're continuously looking what products the cloud can actually offer us to enhance the product offering. Where I sit in a lot of exchange conferences, and the conversation is about should we be on the cloud or not. The answer seems pretty obvious, but because of the, let's say, the burden that exchanges carry with it, it can be still quite behind the curve in certain extents. So that's actually where I see the revolution in exchanges happen, to be honest with you, Patrick.
Yeah, well, I think that's a great point. And I think it's a really, really fascinating point that you made, because in fact, we were talking about this, just last month in Amsterdam at the AFM conference. You were on a fabulous panel that we had. I mean, really, really terrific panel. But you were quick to point out the foibles of the actual exchange technology market. And I think you're on a very, very strong point, because it seems to me that in exchange technology, while they do some things fabulously well, not trying to argue that in any respect, at the same time, their innovation has actually fallen quite a long way behind the marketplaces that you get every day dealing from client to client on the internet.
It is also a method of trying to sort of enhance the marketplace. So look, let's say 50 odd years ago, when I coded exchange systems, we had a fantastic product which we released, and of course it ran on site at the client site. That got evolved to run more virtual. I know certain providers are now running those same exchange solutions in the cloud, but we have to have a look at the innovation. Has anything really changed? It's still the same software package, big bundled piece of software that gets moved around. In that respect, yes, it's now running on the cloud or not, but it actually hasn't evolved in terms of what it actually is made up of. It's a large piece of software that gets developed and placed in different locations. Whereas these kind of marketplaces, we focus a lot on low-code, no-code type of solutions. So there's a lot of usage of existing solutions that the cloud providers bring us that we don't have to worry about. So we leverage a lot more of the functionality that is in the cloud, completely cloud native, and we don't have to worry about it from these marketplaces point of view, because that's given to us. So there's no developers focusing on it, which means that our complete focus from this space is actually completely done in terms of looking at what is the value proposition we actually bring to these customers. What do our customers and our clients actually want? What is our listings required to enhance listings? What existing technology on the cloud can we use to leverage that? So the systems are a lot more distributed. And of course, these marketplaces are focused a lot cross-border. So we also have a look at what can we do to enhance the customer experience, let's say in Poland versus the customer experience in Amsterdam or in New York. And what do we leverage from the cloud technology to actually make that better? So in a certain extent, the listings on these products are actually global listings, are not just concentrated on a certain place. But saying that, I do believe that this is the new frontier for exchange platforms. I think there's a massive value proposition that's available here.
You know, it's really, really interesting, because actually in the run-up to that AFM conference, the Tech Day, I was actually in the background pressing for a discussion of no-code, low-code. And the difficulty was there was actually nobody to talk about it. Isn't that an interesting? I mean, that in itself tells you everything you need to know. They sort of talk to all the vendors, and none of the vendors want to do no-code, low-code, which, by the way, I think is a total mistake, because I actually think vendors offering assistance with no-code, low-code will sell lots more kit down the line and do more business, because the market will expand. But second of all, then they went to exchanges and said, do you want to talk about no-code, low-code? No one wanted to talk about it amongst the membership base, because nobody was using it. Now, I know that's not true the world over, so angry exchanges, don't write to me right now and say, of course you're using no-code, low-code, because I know several of you are. I'll be delighted to hear from you on the QT, though, if you are, because it's very interesting to compare notes. And I mean, we as a business live off no-code, low-code for a lot of the things that we need to do. And it's fascinating. The exchange world is just ignoring this incredible opportunity to make life simpler, faster, go to market easier, and give better customer response.
Exactly, and I think one thing we can mention is, look, there's a bunch of exchanges in the world that needs to push the performance boundary. That really needs to have sub 900 nanosecond firewall to firewall to suffice for that market conditions. But we also need to take into account there's a lot of exchanges out there that do not need that kind of performance, that needs to basically bring more of a value proposition to investors and the retail market, and not so much on the actual performance on the software side. And that's where these kind of low-code, no-code solutions actually come in, because the exchange doesn't have to worry about so much as the software, but what can we actually leverage, which is available to actually focus on our participants in the market. that being said, it's also a great opportunity from this environment, because the one thing, Patrick, as you know, it's been for years so many discussions about cross-exchange linkages and having exchanges that run cross markets and linking exchanges and have listings or that are basically available cross-border. And this is exactly the kind of stuff that this cloud technology will actually bring. So I actually see a fantastic future for the providers of these technologies, because there's a lot of the cloud providers are now putting a lot of effort in bringing more types of these solutions to the market, and it's bringing out products that will enhance the availability of bringing software in, using less software, using more of what is available in the cloud, and actually making things like this a possibility. So the future in that is actually quite fantastic. And of course, I don't want to speculate on the future, but the chances of having, you know, centralized order books that's available across the planet is actually would become a reality when we talk about these cloud platform providers and what they actually bring to the market.
Fantastic. So, I mean, the no-code, low-code opportunity is huge. You're absolutely right, of course, Louisjan. I mean, the Formula One end of the market, the people who are playing this super league of low latency, where they've got to have everything done essentially faster than the trader decided he wanted to place the order in the first place, they're in a totally different world. But if you look through Young's pyramid, that's really only 10, 20 markets at the very top, maybe 30, something like that. You've got hundreds, 500 markets and more being built all the time, plus marketplaces such as your own, etc., that are not regulated exchanges, but are very, very valid, important marketplaces, all of which can benefit from this no-code, low-code. And in emerging markets, there's nothing better, I think, at the moment than no-code, low-code for being able to build, even to try and build new product sets and see what the customers think about it very, very quickly, rather than having to go through the old, you know, let's all go to a mountain resort for 3 days, scope it all out with a vendor and spend umpteen tens of thousands, and that's just the red wine bill before you allow for what you've actually paid the vendor in the first place, etc. And it really becomes a huge opportunity to transform and build better markets all the way through the entire family of marketplaces.
Exactly. And we need to have a look at it as well, because we from a cloud, from our marketplaces, from example, HousingAnywhere, for example, we've got 50 million plus people who search our site on a yearly basis, and you know we provide houses for basically thousands of people. So from that perspective alone, the systems are decentralized in the sense that we actually provide that kind of power to actually bring this to the market. Now, in that sense, yes, I'll get to the regulation, because there is actually, although we're not a regulated exchange, there's a lot of self-regulation that happens in these markets. But I'll get back to that point later. But we are creating centralized order books to actually focus and do a little bit of, let's call it, concentration on instrument. Now, if you take that from like an emerging market exchange point of view, how do you get more eyes on your listings? How do you get more eyes on your instruments? And basically, this is what it actually will bring. Now, in that respect, it also opens the door for multiple vendors for one exchange to actually have multiple vendors, because it's becoming a marketplace where we can actually place different instrument types into the cloud, and the exchange can actually pick how they want the instruments to run. And that might be one vendor, it might be multiple vendors. So I think we're moving into a future place where multiple vendors can actually play in the space, where we actually provide cloud services on the cloud platform, and the exchange can basically elect to use that services or not, depending on what the type of instrument is that they're listing.
That's really, really interesting. So let's try and flesh out a bit more. You just mentioned this almost intriguing kind of holy grail, the idea of a sort of an order book from the cloud, as it were. How do you think that could work going forward?
So let's have a look at what the perfect future vision is. The perfect future vision is I run a market, and I want to I've got let's say a bond or a derivative, an option, some type of an option, delta neutral option maybe, or I've got a stock standard equity that I want to list. So I will actually go and have a look at the portfolio and see, okay, cool, these are the types of order books. I want to trade my bond in yield, needs to match in yield, or my option needs to match on volatility instead of premium. So I can basically then pick the order book that matches my portfolio and the customer base that I want to attract to this. I pick it, and then my instrument will run on that basis, and basically all my, let's call it front-end vendors, would connect into that instrument, and then that's basically my market. So that is the perfect solution, which we're talking about, I don't know, in years' time. And then we track ourselves back. How do we get to that view? And if we have a look at the existing cloud technologies that's running now, for example, on Google or AWS or Azure, that's actually the building blocks for that technology is already actually available in these solutions. It's a matter of basically building that up and basically producing that kind of functionality in the cloud, and then basically for the exchange to take it up. And then, of course, the big question is always like, how do we regulate it? Is it in country? Do we need to keep the data in country? Because in a lot of, especially emerging market exchanges, a huge effort is to make sure that my exchange is in country. So my data is in country. So there's a lot to be built on there. But these are actually, in retrospect, very easy solutions to get past, very easy problems to actually to surpass. And once we get to that point, it's a matter of building the necessary products on the cloud solutions and then getting the exchanges to actually buy into it. So the net effect of that is we're looking at a reduced cost for exchanges to actually use the kind of software and build their trading platforms. But a massive focus can be then placed on what does my product bring? How do I do, for example, physical delivery? For example, how do I bring that to the market, and what other infrastructure can I bring to the market to actually attract the client base? So from the perfect view of where we want to be in, I don't know, 30 years time, let's have a look what we need to actually produce in there now. And this is where the massive opportunity for let's say exchange vendors sits, because you can now create little bits of structured products that run on the cloud that from a costing perspective is a lot more cost effective than you have now, because you're basically just releasing the same thing on the cloud, and you've got your exchanges to buy into it. And exchanges have got a massive opportunity to not lock themselves into a specific vendor, but actually choose what actually brings to their market. Because I think, Patrick, your experience as well, there's a lot of times that exchanges take a piece of software that might not fit exactly into what they require, but they'll make the market work how the software works instead of making the software works how the market actually works.
Yeah, and I think also, I mean, the whole process, the problem I see, and I'm in wholehearted agreement with you, the problem I see is actually that the vendors have completely got the wrong sales pattern in order to match the market of the future. Because essentially, if you deal with the AWSs or the Azures or the world, yes, they have people who travel around selling you stuff and will meet you and so on. But actually, you can get 99.9% of the information you want off the web. And if you want to go and test it and try it, you just give them a credit card and you basically put down, a few $100, and you can sort of start working on a use case. And then you can go to them and say, look, this is actually what I want to do at scale. And how does that work, blah, blah, blah. But if you look at the way that exchanges have always been sold, I mean, it's this, they're still selling the big centralized box solution, which is essentially a Formula 1 racing car, or maybe a Formula 2 racing car, or Formula 3 racing car. But it's actually not an SUV. It's not a Ford 150 truck. And you have to take a huge amount of stuff that they've, as you say, pre-built, and you've got to sort of fit your market around that, and then you can tinker with it a little bit and sort of put on, I don't know, better rims and wheels or something and a better steering wheel in order to make it look like your market. But actually the whole sales process is all oriented towards that. It's spending several days finding out what you want. It's working out the best proposition for you. There's a huge amount of expense involved in the whole selling, as opposed to where we're going with cloud and no code and low code, which is, it's almost like being a garagiste in the 1950s in South Africa. You've got these three bits. You've got sort of an Alfa Romeo gearbox and a Ford engine and a chassis of something that came from the farm next door. And it's like, how do you bolt it all together? And the answer is a kind of no code, low code solution in the old ages.
And also, if you have a look at the market, for example, most of these cloud providers are now actually waking up to this fact, to be honest with you. So there's a lot of these cloud providers that are actually bringing solutions to make this actually more possible. I know there's quite some big exchanges in North America that's now taking this on and basically working closer with the cloud provider. Notice, not with the software vendor as closely, but with the cloud provider closer to actually bring this kind of stuff to market. And then where the exchange vendor comes in is basically bringing the let's call it the environment around it, to the enablement of that market, and not necessarily the background infrastructure of this market. But it's the same sort of thing. If you have a look at Formula 1, for example, as well, how many engines are shared between the different teams, and how many parts are shared between the different teams. And that is basically, so you can actually see that as where the exchange market is to evolve to, that we're all using a common background. Maybe we're using the stuff that's common across all exchanges is basically common in the cloud, and what the vendors actually bring is the stuff around it. How do we actually bring those kind of products and enhance the, let's call it the value proposition of those products to the market? There's a lot of that that's currently happening. And of course, from a connectivity point of view, from an exchange that now runs on the cloud and an exchange that basically is available worldwide, from a connectivity point of view, which was always a big stumbling block, even in the 2000s, those problems are now basically solved when you bring it to the cloud. If you take into account your price discovery, that is now globally available. Anybody can hook into your price discovery. So there's actually a massive market proposition that actually brings it. That brings the cost down for exchanges, brings more value for software vendors, and actually enhances exchanges in general. And then, of course, from a regulation point of view, this makes the regulatory practices also a lot easier, because you can have now a standard set of practices that run across the cloud solution, not necessarily the exchange solution, which is completely different kettle of fish you can open, but it makes life a lot easier for everybody. And of course, and as these exchanges evolve and as these marketplaces in the cloud evolve, the expectation would be that that performance gap will actually lower, that you can actually have emerging market exchanges that compete on performance with the big exchanges out there. That's the sort of direction we're going to go to. But the main fact here is that the old box model, that we bring a box into your office and put it down, that model is going to change. It's going to change very quickly, and certain vendors are going to be left behind and certain are going to be on it. But there's a huge space for that currently, and a huge opening for that to actually be taken.
Yes, it's very, very interesting altogether. And also it's going to make the market much more customer responsive, because I think one of the things you said at the AFM conference was how you, as the VP of engineering at HousingAnywhere, need to be super responsive to what's going on in the market in a way that, to be fair, regulation plays its part in the exchange world, but nonetheless, exchanges struggle to be as fast to change.
Exactly. In these marketplaces like HousingAnywhere, and of course these marketplaces around, if we track market performance on a continuous basis in real time, and in any point in time in the process, we can actually, for example, change ratings, change various settings within the market to actually make the marketplace more attractive. And of course, we can do that from seasonality point of view, because this is a seasonal market. And which sort of the same with exchange markets as well, to a certain extent. So we can actually change the market, bring new features to the market in an extremely quick pace. Sometimes a few hours, we can actually bring changes to the market. If you take it from an exchange point of view, that takes years, months sometimes to bring those changes. But this is where the regulation also comes into play, because the one thing about all marketplaces, doesn't matter where you are, what kind of products you actually list. Integrity in the market is absolutely key. The moment you've lost integrity in what you actually in the marketplace, nobody will play in your market. It doesn't matter if you're eBay or if you're the CME. You've got to have integrity in your market, and we place a lot of effort into integrity of the markets. Now, in exchange world, a lot of that integrity is built in by the regulatory framework that sits around and governs these exchanges. Marketplaces like us, we are our own regulator to some extent. So we continuously involve our regulatory practices to make sure that the integrity stays intact. We show our customers actually that the services we provide are trustworthy and are safe to use. And that's the evolution that these marketplaces are taking. And I think that is basically, from a certain extent, the way that the regulation exchanges should, I don't know if it will, but should take as well. Where there's a lot of effort is done in the trust and safety. And then basically we use a lot of AI tools to basically ensure the surveillance of the market and continuously monitor the surveillance of the market. So we use a lot of those kind of tooling sets to create the baseline, and then we basically self-regulate ourselves to make sure that we are integrity is key to what we actually produce in the markets. And that is I can't understate that, because integrity is so key to any marketplace. It doesn't matter what you actually do. And you will find, Patrick, that although there's no regulatory body as such, well, we do have various European regulatory restrictions in which we need to operate in, but there's no regulatory body that basically puts a spotlight on you. So you have to do that self-regulation. And I feel that sometimes the self-regulation that these markets do are also quite far ahead of what the type of regulatory practices that happens in exchange markets. In terms of just real-time monitoring of your market, every single second of it is actually quite spectacular in the way we do. And the amount of tools we actually use in the cloud to actually ensure integrity is quite spectacular.
And that brings us elegantly to the exciting moment where we can share a short video. Well, who knew, ladies and gentlemen? They kept it very quiet. There was an American presidential election recently. Now the incredible frenzy is on to see who's going to be occupying all of the different cabinet posts, what's going to be happening in the overall status of the American government for the next 4 years. And very exciting and intriguing it looks too.
No doubt about the American election. What does that mean for financial markets? Well, it's interesting because Trump is rapidly making appointments. Therefore, we're seeing a large number of officials already being picked. We know that the head of the Fed Reserve is going to stay the same. In fact, he was originally appointed by Trump to see out his term. Obviously, there's going to be huge change. The regulatory bodies will all change. SEC chairman, CFTC chairman, probably also the FTC chairman, Lena Khan there has been very controversial too. Going to sweep away, and I think we're going to see, given the fact of the Doge, which is going to be led by Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, that there's a big deregulatory push in here. How will that affect markets overall? Pretty positively, I think. Anything that reduces the deficit is going to be positive. Anything that therefore also encourages more trade is going to be positive. In big world, it could be morning in America.
Yes, indeed, morning in America. And of course, absolutely, there's no doubt. I slightly misspoke there. I mean, the FTC chairman, Lena Khan, is definitely going, although oddly, a few Republican sources thought she might stay, which seems rather weird given her approach. We're back with Louisjan here. So Louisjan, we were talking just a moment ago about how effectively you were using surveillance systems in your day-to-day approach to market.
Yes, so for example, I'll give you one example. To make sure there's integrity between the tenant and, let's say, the advertiser on the platform. The kind of regulatory surveillance we use is a lot of AI-based surveillance. So we continuously monitoring conversations. We could keep on monitoring the listing that's on the market. Keep on monitoring, for example, the pricing and what's going on to make sure that there's trust between the instrument, let's call it that, and the buyer in the market. So we're continuously having a look at that. We use a lot of AI tooling to ensure integrity in the market, because of course there's thousands of conversations happening at every single second, and we use a lot of, instead of having people actually do it, we use a lot of tooling like that. And of course, it continuously adapts itself. It learns from what is let's say hurts integrity and what is good for integrity, and then the model basically builds itself up to actually ensure that the integrity in the market, and of course that there's a lot of trust and security in the market as well.
Yeah, I mean, integrity, security, all the things that you have to have for a market wherever you are in the world. It's very interesting. How do you actually manage to go about the process of ensuring that listings are legitimate? So
we've got a set of criteria which we take into account. So we take that set of criteria, and then of course we verify who basically the landlord or the advertiser on the platform is. We build a lot of verification in there, and we use a lot of partners that are also cloud-based to actually connect to and actually ensure integrity. So we basically do a lot of verification beforehand. And then once we verified it, we keep on monitoring that listing on a continuous real-time basis and having a look at everything that happens in there, to the extent that we actually have a look, for example, if there's a certain resource that the lister put on the market, we can have a look at that resource and actually compare it with other resources to make sure that that's not the same, or a copied resource, for example, photo or details on the listing. And then we basically compare that with other listings to make sure that it's a secure listing. We do that with most of the listings we do in the market. And of course, like I said, we also continuously monitor conversations. And we use various cloud platforms and built-in solutions to actually do that. And of course, we've got built-in solutions from an AI perspective that we utilize in the market. that keeps on learning from existing listings and making sure that there's trust and security in the market. Of course, the other aspect is ensuring that that from a security point of view, we've got all the checks and balances from a security point of view. But a key aspect here is that we use a lot of infrastructure that's already built into the cloud to do this for us. We don't build the stuff yourselves, which is, of course, part of the low-code, no-code solution that we've been talking about.
Yes, it all comes back to low-code, no-code in many ways in the way you're using it, and also the ability to link into these other credit-related, property-related databases around the world, which are increasingly themselves digitizing and therefore making all our lives much simpler in order to manage to check this information. But of course, it's also fascinating for you because people look at it and say, oh, you're HousingAnywhere, you're a rental property market, but it must differ quite considerably across markets. And I mean, I'm just thinking about, obviously, terms and conditions differ because depending on where you are in Europe, I mean, France is what, 3 months plus 3 months, usually plus whatever deposit. Poland is usually a month plus, you know, blah, blah, blah. It's obviously quite fascinating when you're trying to deal with these disparities in the markets across borders.
And it's actually weird strange because it's no different from actually how you would from exchange platform treat the different instrument types based on seasonality or closeout periods or anything like that. So we've got of course, teams here that basically monitor that on a continuous basis and basically will assist listers to actually list those properties. We've got teams here that's cross-border teams that focus a lot on that. Because a lot of our let's say our market is based up of, let's call it expats or students that's coming to Europe. That's a large portion of the market. We need to make that experience for them a lot easier and simpler to actually engage with the market and take away a lot of that logistic burden for them. And of course, from the other perspective, making sure that the listing is valid in terms of the legislation in that country. So we do rely a lot on our advertisers to actually ensure the correctness of the listing. But we also monitor it on a continuous basis and help them out to basically make sure that there's it all follows normal regulatory practices in terms of the legislation which they pertain under.
And also, I mean, you mentioned something there. You're talking about seasonality. You mentioned students. Well, that's obviously fascinating because, okay, you're talking about a lot of overseas students coming onto your platforms. That's presumably the Erasmus scheme in Europe, which therefore operates kind of every 6 months. But huge bulks of students, I mean, are renting property year in, year out. And I know from my own experience owning some property in Poland, you're talking about the rental market year is actually from about the 1st of August. It gets hot about the 15th of August. And by the 15th of September, it's already in decline. It's incredibly concentrated. You're talking about 70, 80% of the transactions in university towns are taking place in that sort of a window.
It is. And there's about I would say about a 4-month period, probably from we see a sort of I would say an uplift from middle June to sort of ends late September. We're lucky because we cross border and we've got a lot of European countries and of course in North America as well that uses this platform. And so it's a lot of students and a lot of expats that basically use the platform. And of course, students within Europe that change countries and go to various universities. So we're lucky in a sense that we're a big marketplace, so we see year-round activity, but we definitely have a high period there during that season. And that's one thing that I find fascinating because when my days at STT, there was also a high period, you know, before futures closeout period, especially on the derivatives market, is also a high period. The focus here is, of course, is how do we actually facilitate that amount of transactions? How do we make the customer experience as simple as possible? So a lot of focus going on of actually removing the barriers from our tenants actually getting a property. How do we make that customer experience a lot simpler? And how do we make that flow a lot quicker? And that's where also we, for example, work a lot with our advertisers to make sure that there's enough details on the listing, there's enough quality listings, and of course, it comes to payment. How do we ensure that smooth payment between the landlord and the tenant and the landlord, and various payment options depending on where you are in the world, and especially during those seasonal time, it's very interesting to see how these marketplaces evolve. And of course, there's year on year a continuous uplift where we see more and more activity on a year-on-year basis from that as well. So it's a lot like you would see like a futures closeout period where there's a lot of activity before the closeout, and the same sort of activity we see here as well. Of course, to this kind of marketplace, it happens once a year for 4 months. which is quite fascinating. But to be honest with you, from an exchange point of view, the effort was always to make sure that the pipes into the exchange and the linkages are all up and fast enough to cater for the traffic. When you're running on a cloud provider like us, all of that effort is offloaded to your cloud provider. So we just focus on bringing the best customer experience to the market instead of having to worry about the performance of the market to that aspect.
Yeah, and that's a fabulous thing, because therefore you're beautifully not having to run that excess supply for potentially 6 or 8 months of the year when there's not the demand for it. You're just paying for it as and when it actually comes into the cloud, which has got to be superb. And we're talking about the cloud a great deal today, ladies and gentlemen, but I want to expand your horizons even further. Let's look into outer space. Our book of the week this week is The Space Value of Money, Rethinking Finance Beyond a Risk and Time. It was written by Armin V. Papazian, and it's a fascinating, fresh and innovative perspective on sustainability and finance. In fact, you can go back through our pantheon of IPO-VIDs, and you can check in. About 6-8 weeks ago, we were talking to Dr. Armin about his book. A fascinating IPO-VID it was too, and I thoroughly recommend you have a read at The Space Value of Money, a great book of the week. Coming up, of course, this weekend on Saturday, you'll get our next book of the week recommendation, and you can get that in the EI Weekend newsletter, which is absolutely free. Our macro read of a few interesting and thought-provoking headlines from around the world. For all those of you who are like, as I heard John Colesman describe it this morning, coelacanths of data. In other words, people who like reading stuff all over the place and quite often in long form, rather than just picking up tiny snippets as they go. Don't forget, equally, ladies and gentlemen, to support this podcast, Exchange Invest, the daily newsletter of the board's business, $499 per annum per user license. We would welcome you as a subscriber, and it helps us to put out IPO-VIDs such as this one, where we're discussing the evolution of markets technology with the fabulous Louisjan Bonthuys. So, Louisjan, if you look therefore and compare how the sort of the client-to-client C2C kind of interface is going that you have, and the way that the exchange world is going, do you think they're going to both continue to go in opposite directions, or somehow or other the twain is going to come closer over the course of the next decade, not just in no-code, low-code, but in the overall way that they're trying to operate?
I definitely, from my perspective, I see that there's going to be a convergence. I see it getting a lot closer. There's, to be honest with you, I don't see any other approach. The vendors are going to start using more of what is available out there already. The value proposition they're going to bring to exchanges is going to be a lot more. So the way I see this evolution is that vendors are going to start saying, you know what, here's a platform on the cloud, Mr. Exchange, pick your instrument that you want to trade, pick how you want to trade it. It's already customized for you. You just pick it off the cloud and then use it. They'll then go, well, what's the type of regulatory framework you need around it? And then go, Mrs. Exchange, go and pick your regulatory framework that you want around this. Then basically merge those together and then run with it. They're going to basically, there's certain rules and factors going to be built into those instruments to say, this is a cloud instrument, these are the rules around it. How do you want to change the rules? And then basically run with it. Exchanges are going to have to change the way they run their infrastructure, in the sense of that the cloud provider is going to be the backbone of infrastructure. The software vendors are going to bring the how the instruments are traded, and the instruments are going to sit on the cloud, and then everybody's going to connect into that. Of course, the challenges, like it always is going to be, what API do we use? How do we interact with these exchanges? What's the default communication mechanism? And what's the rules around it? That's going to be very simple to actually, when there's a convergence, actually bypass those and actually get around it. So that's going to bring a lot of effort, so a lot of value. So what I'm seeing is, Patrick, is that from let's call it emerging market exchanges are going to start utilizing this kind of platforms a lot more. So they're going to start having a look at what instruments are available, start using more of what cloud infrastructure, because of course it's going to save a lot of money, it's going to save a lot of effort. The vendors are going to start bringing more value propositions that are already sitting in the cloud. We're going to see a lot of more, the one thing that everybody always talks about, it never really happens, is exchange linkages, to an extent that emerging markets link to pool the liquidity on the instrument. I can actually see that happening now, where multiple exchanges can share the same order book and actually get all their participants to participate in it, because of course the technology barrier has been removed, and the instrument is now available for everybody to trade. The next step in evolution, of course, the regulatory framework around that, which should be pretty simple. And then after that, what we see is a clear path where exchanges are going to be the facilitators of the product, and the focus is going to be let's call it the software focus is going to be sitting on the cloud and what value proposition you can bring. And the core infrastructure, the core speed, the core backbone of this is going to be sitting with the cloud provider and not the software vendors. So I think pretty soon we'll see the day of bringing your box into the market and say, here it is, here's your exchange. Those days are probably numbered to a certain extent.
It's fascinating because also the other thing that it strikes me is legacy exchanges, if we can call them that, whether they're in the emerging world or they're in the big world, or however you want to describe it, the richer world, they always strike me as somewhat frightened and find it difficult to move forward and change things and do things. And the one thing which I think is intriguing about the new era marketplaces such as HousingAnywhere is how you have fused together your own very, very strong integrity and self-regulation, but nonetheless, you're not afraid to go out there and innovate stuff, break things, find a way forward for the customer. And it seems to me that one of the big things that legacy exchanges are really going to have to work on is this ability to be less linear and a lot more flexible going forward. Would you agree?
I would. And to be honest with you, let's have a look at it from this perspective. There's somebody, and I don't like to use the word disruptor at all, but there is going to come a point where there is a disruptor. And we've seen a couple of disruptors coming in the exchange world in the last 20 years that has actually changed the way. They might have come and gone, but they've changed the way we actually do business from an exchange perspective. So let's have a look at that from a future perspective. We're looking at an exchange that's going to come up, start utilizing more of these kind of technologies and actually be a more cross-planet marketplace, leveraging what's already sitting in the cloud, leveraging connectivity globally into cloud solutions, bringing multiple vendors together and not just using one vendor, and then taking it forward. So I'm seeing that there is going to be, it's either going to be one of the existing exchanges, or it's basically going to be a new exchange. It's going to change the landscape of how this is going to go forward. And then, of course, that change is going to sit with us wherever. So definitely, I completely agree with you. This is going to be the landscape change that we're looking in future, because and we're going to see, I think we're going to see a lot more exchanges focusing on specific types of products instead of one exchange being the one and all for everything. We're going to see a lot of exchanges focusing specific in a certain niche of the market or specific facet of the market. And then from a customer, from a investor point of view, from a customer point of view, you're not going to see that. All you're going to see from a client point of view is a market space of instruments, and you're not going to really care what is the exchange sitting in the back of it. As long as the exchange fulfills your regulatory requirements, fulfills your legislative requirements, you can basically trade on an instrument. What sits at the back of it and how it's run and who runs it is actually not going to matter that much anymore. This is my little bit of a future view, if I can call it that.
I love it. I love it. And I'm in heated agreement with you, because one of the other things I think is very interesting you just hit upon, I mean, what I would call the model of a lot of exchanges for a long time now has been to become department stores. So they're selling a bit of everything, and therefore they have, of course, a lovely seasonal thing where sometimes commodities are going well and sometimes interest rates are going well and sometimes equities are going well and bonds are going well. And overall, as long as they've got one or two things moving ahead, essentially they produce good results year in, year out. But it's fascinating that you're suggesting that we might now find that maybe the department store model isn't so good, particularly, and I would agree with this, for smaller economies, but specialization is really the thing that makes it really, really work for a smaller economy.
And imagine if, for example, you have a look at you've got an exchange that trades an equity. You've got a different exchange that trades the future on that equity. You've got a different exchange that trades the option on the future on that equity. And you've got a different exchange that, for example, does the convertible bond on that. Now, you, from an investor point of view, all you see is the instrument and the various facet classes of the instrument, because you are connecting into a front end that is connecting to a cloud platform that contains everything at the back of it. And then each little exchange at the back, or each exchange group at the back that runs either one or multiple of these facets, can actually then do a lot more in terms of bringing they're bringing out the product, bringing more functionality to that product. Because from my experience, especially in emerging markets, what we're trying to do from emerging market point of view is actually bring more value adds to the instrument instead of just bringing the instrument to the market. So I can actually see that growing over time. Instead of just having a standard derivative on the market that people can buy and sell, it's a lot focuses on how do we actually change that trade that happens on the market. What is the post-trade activity? How can we enhance and make the post-trade activity easier and simpler? So those kind of facets can actually be a lot of work can be done on those background facets to actually bring a lot more to market. And we see it here as well. We work at HousingAnywhere with various partners, and we've got various partners that we work with that bring product to the market, and each of them brings a certain facet. So in that case, we're sort of like the front door. We bring the marketplace, we bring the listings. You can search for your listings on our marketplace, and at the back, there's various, let's call it little exchanges or advertisers that have multiple listings sitting on our platform that regulate and run those listings, but we the interface to those listings to a certain extent. So, and exchanges are probably going to move in exactly the same direction, where you've got a lot of functionality sitting in the back, brought in by various vendors, exchanges, and all you want to do as an investor, you want to see your instrument on the market and the various ways you can trade that instrument.
Gosh, that's just been such a breathtaking discussion over the course of the last 50-something minutes, Louisjan, as we've been looking at the development of exchange technology, the development of markets technology, marketplaces as a whole around the world, and of course the integrity and trust that's vital to all of them. It's that point in the show where we ask the same question of all our guests. Louisjan Bonthuys, where do you think the capital market revolution goes next?
From a tech point of view, I clearly see that cloud-based solutions are going to be the future. So the conversation of should we be in the cloud or not is going to disappear. By default, everything is going to be in the cloud. And I see the cloud providers playing a massive role in exchanges going forward, where they're actually going to bring various products to market to actually give exchanges a lot more space to maneuver in and to run their products in. And I see that software vendors are going to run around and try and find their niche in this new world, and how to engage with the exchanges and how to communicate to the exchanges and how do you sell product if your product is sitting in the cloud to an exchange. And I also see a lot of changes in the way software is developed in terms of exchange platforms, that basically exchanges can basically pick how they want the exchange to run from a cloud-based solution instead of the other way around. So that gives us a massive opportunity, Patrick, which I see that exchanges are going to control the markets and not the software, like it should be.
Louisjan Bonthuys, what a fantastic show. It's been wonderful talking about developments in marketplace technology and markets technology and exchanges as a whole. And I agree with you. I think the point is we want to get to a situation where the markets are actually running the markets rather than the technology dictating what the markets should be. That's our show for today, ladies and gentlemen. Absolutely wonderful discussion with Louisjan Bonthuys, VP of Engineering at HousingAnywhere, coming to us from Rotterdam today. I've been in, well, a not quite so sunny Granada as it might be in Spain today. Apologies, we had to record this due entirely to issues at my end, but thank you very much for bearing with us during this time. I just want to say a huge word of thanks to our fantastic production team today. Thank you very, very much to Racy, Fernando, AJ, and Janella for a super smooth show. We're going to be back next week. Our guest is going to be Shiloh Bates. Change of pace. We're going to be talking about bringing CLO, collateralized loan obligations, to your investment flow. That's going to be IPO-VID number 162. In the meantime, this has been IPO-VID 161 with our fantastic guest, Louisjan Bonthuys. I think actually in the future, there may be an opportunity to have a further conversation with Louisjan as we discuss and the world of exchanges themselves develop. And of course, ladies and gentlemen, it only remains for me to say that if you're interested in what goes on in the world of markets, subscribe to Exchange Invest at exchangeinvest.com, the bulletin of the bourse business, the water cooler of the exchange information era. And indeed, if you're looking to try and build a marketplace of your own, then give us a call. I'm always available to look forward to building new and exciting exchanges the world over. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish you a great week in life and markets.